Hello, FACEIT enjoyers from all around the world. We're here for another catch-up because it's the final week right now. So important to have a catch-up on what happened last week and the sort of placements and standings for all the teams as we get into that crucial race for top 8. Now, the good thing about this North American catch-up is there's no Korean teams to ruin it for the North American teams this time. There's no Ents. Ents are not in the FACEIT North America, so they can't ruin it for you this time. This is just some good old-fashioned North American on North American action. So there's a decent amount to get through and a lot to obviously talk about at the end in terms of setup for the final week and that final race for top 8. So let's jump straight into it. We start with a game, well, it says students of a game, but we all know now, we were all there for the reveal, they are NRG now. In terms of result though, there was no surprise. This is good team versus bad team. And no surprise, have a good team won. Pretty straightforward in the end, dominant for NRG. And puts them very much in a good position to qualify for that top 8, as most people would expect. We then get a pretty similar story, TSM against Gilberts NTMR, and same old story, good team beats bad team, good team won. More at 10, but not a lot of details available on this map, but it is probably for this match, but it's not very important, you know. TSM, also a team very much securing their place in the top 8. Similarly here, UNC Inc versus Toronto Defiant. Toronto Defiant, all business before Dallas, no off-rolling in this one, just smoked them, and not too much more to say. UNC Inc, a team that have been lingering around the bottom for a while, and they were not the team to take down the Toronto Defiant. Then we get one of the more interesting fixtures, Pip against Luminosity, but ultimately it was a bit of back and forth, but Luminosity come out on top. I think very impressive numbers from Vision on map 1, very impressive numbers from King on map 2, and while Pip are very much still in this race for top 8, they do find themselves in that situation where they might make top 8, but they're really struggling to take maps or put any of the sort of top 5 or 6 teams in North America in any true danger, and I was shown by this result here as well. Then a team that have been soaring up the FACEIT rankings lately is Shikigami. Their new addition Doomed is really doing wonders for them. And they put up a pretty straightforward win against Avidity here to keep that good run going. Again, Doomed, since he's come into the team, has been the person frequently putting up the best numbers in a lot of their performances. And he does the same here. And it really, really helps Shikigami in what turned out to be a pretty good week for Shikigami again. Then we get one of the more interesting series that's happened just before Dallas, so it was a nice look at Toronto and some of the stuff they would try. Oasis is where they had their scare. It was Amalgam Mirror that FMCL actually won, and this obviously maybe some problems that ultimately came back to haunt Toronto once we got to Dallas in some of their deficiencies in that Amalgam Mirror. Once we went over to Midtown, it was more Malga from FMCL, but Toronto actually played the Sigma version of a comp that a lot of the EMEA teams tried and failed at Dallas, but this time Toronto do come out on top of it. Then once we got to Route 66, it was a chance for Toronto to go on to dive, and then it really got away with them. And this is obviously a lot of what people thought Toronto's strength would be, the ability to play all the comps and then twist the matchup and play to the map as best they can in all these situations. And it got them through a series against FMCL, ultimately reasonably comfortably in the end once we got to the end of that Route 66. Then after that scare against FMCL, there was no scares at all against Smart Fellas. A full Toronto sweep, business as usual, another win on the board, and Toronto remain unbeaten within the FACEIT round robin. Similarly here, we got Gilberts NTMR taking on FMCL, and it's a bit of a mismatch, right? FMCL disposed of them without too much trouble. Aerial probably the one putting up the biggest numbers on the FMCL side, but really not too much trouble at all. And FMCL alongside NRG and alongside even Luminosity and TSM, a team that have pretty much secured their spot in top 8. This was, on paper, one of the more stern tests for M80 before their trip to Dallas, but it didn't end up actually being that much of a test. The usual candidates put up the big numbers in the form of Happy and Pelican, and M80 kind of cruise to a win. There's obviously a lot of questions with M80 in terms of their FACEIT roster going forward, but this was the well, not the original lineup, but the lineup we've become most familiar with, the Happy Pelican, Ultraviolet Hawk, Liar lineup, and they actually made pretty short work of TSM here. So while M80 might go through a retool and we might see a different version of them later on in this tournament, it, at least at this point, very much seemed like TSM again maybe struggling to crack into that top 2. Then we get another Valentine game, this time against Shikigami. In theory, a team that they were a little bit closer to in terms of the power rankings and could maybe punch up, take some maps off, but that wasn't to be the case. It was Amazing who probably had the best numbers for Shikigami here, and while it was a game Shikigami expected to win, once we get to this stage of a tournament, it's always super important to win these games you're supposed to win. Every win counts for the same, whether you're meant to win it, not meant to win it, got no chance to win it. They all count the same. So again, good week for Shikigami. Help themselves soar up in that table. Then we get Fluffy Aimers against Smart Fellas. So Smart Fellas have really been around the bottom of the table for the entire length of this competition. Fluffy Aimers, a team that seems to have actually got a little bit better over time. Astro, probably the most well-known of the players on this team. And again, while it sits in the category of a game they're supposed to win, super important. They were a little bit behind when we looked at the standings last week, but they are climbing right back up and have put themselves firmly in a top 8 race. And wins like this, important wins to get. In terms of the numbers, Prota probably put up the best numbers out of anyone here, but a good win for Fluffy Aimers as we get to crunch time. Valentine played another game against another tough team. They lost again. Valentine had a very difficult string of matches this week. Pretty much none of them they were expected to win, and it's very much the same story here against Luminosity. Easy as you like. Luminosity still have a lot of games to play, because they took that sort of break, was it last week? Maybe the week before last. And they're catching up and they're doing pretty well. And especially when we look at the standings later, you'll see the games in hand Luminosity have. They should be pretty set to make top 8, as everyone expected. Then another Shikigami game, and this one should have been a straightforward one, wasn't a straightforward one. They had a scare on Midtown, but they recovered on Route 66 and won this important game. Now, again, like we said before, that all the wins count, whether you're meant to beat them, whether it's a dogfight, whether it's a roll, they all count for the same. So Shikigami really seal off a very good week, even if it wasn't the most difficult for them on paper. Important wins and important time of the season for Shikigami, and really do seem set to make that top 8. Then we get to what has to be one of the most surprising results we've seen in FACEIT. Green Fortnite is a team we've talked a lot about recently in these catch-ups and some of the live matches. They're a team that have really sort of started going from strength to strength. X10 has been an absolute monster for a team and has put up back-to-back massive performances on Hitscan. But here they fall short against Gilberts Nightmare. The Jake team. It all falls apart for them. And I mean, it was a dogfight. It was back and forth, right? But what a disaster for Green Fortnite. Well, when we look at the standings in a second, you'll see the exact damage this has potentially caused them. But it puts them in a hole they have to try and recover from. And like we said for the other teams, we talked about Shikigami. Oh, they just beat a team they were meant to beat. But it's not always that easy, as Green Fortnite demonstrate here. And Green Fortnite have made their final week a lot harder than it maybe needed to be. So a great result, obviously, for Gilbert's Nightmare. Just their second win of the competition so far, but the real story here is Green Fortnite. What a missed opportunity for them. And then our final game of the week is Valentine, who decided to cap off a difficult week with a game against M80 and had similar difficulties here. And this was M80 dealing with some of those roster shifts, so Nero and Tree had to fill in. Obviously, Nero very much on the roster as an emergency substitute. Trina is a player they do want to bring in, and with some of the potential roster changes to their DPS, might actually find himself in a starting spot on one of the top teams. But not the toughest test for Nero and Tree to come into. They help their team beat Valentine and put themselves overall in a pretty comfortable position in terms of top 8 standings. Which means we should look at the top 8 standings as well, because no surprise, if you win all your games and you lose none of your games, you're going to find yourself at the top of the table, and that's exactly what Toronto Defiant have managed to do here. Similarly, M80 just behind them, game in hand technically, but unlikely to catch them. But probably given the strength of schedule and the games remaining, probably will still finish in this second seed. Meanwhile, a lot of the other familiar candidates, TSM and NRG, Shock, have now done enough as well, you have to feel. And actually, the surprise one to maybe see here is Shikigami. Obviously, they played a couple more games than a lot of the teams around them, but 8 wins probably should be enough to see him into top 8. I've not done the math, but I think they're very much, if they're not technically mathematically in the clear, they're all but mathematically in the clear. Obviously, there's a few more games still left in North America compared to EMEA, so there's a chance for more fluctuation here, but I think Shikigami have probably done enough. Then we look at FMCL, who should be fine in reality. Luminosity still only on 7 wins, but you can see they've actually still got 6 games to play. So Luminosity have plenty of time and can probably actually make a pretty good run at getting into maybe a top 3 or 4 spot, depending on how other games go. Then we get to the crucial bit of it. As you can see, when this line gets drawn, this is 7 spots. There is one more spot in the top 8, currently occupied by Pip, who sit on 6 wins with 5 games left to play. But right behind them are a string of 3 teams, all in contention, and all with plenty of games to play as well. Green Fortnite have 4, as do Fluffy Aimers, and Citrus Nation still have 5 games, the same as Pip. So, chance for so much movement amongst all of these teams, and it's going to be really, I've said it a few times, it's crunch time. It's crunch time at the end of the season. These teams need to win their remaining games, or as many of them as they possibly can. And as such, we should maybe take a look at some of the games ahead, because the strength of schedule now becomes massively important for this final run-in. So, where are we? There's still, obviously, compared to EMEA, if you're watching that video, you maybe only saw a couple of games in this section. We've got a little bit more in play still. Now, some of these games have happened at the time of recording, but, I'm traveling into the past to give us an accurate catch-up of how the week started. So, some of the biggest games we should look forward to are going to be TSM against Toronto, which is right here. Obviously, again, Toronto really probably wants to put on a pretty dominant performance considering how their Dallas ended. TSM, meanwhile, have been focusing entirely on FACEIT and will be very keen to get as high a seeding as they can. And also, outside of the actual result and the implications for the seeding, I think TSM very much as one of this chasing pack, they want to prove how close they are. FMCL were able to take a map of Toronto last week. Can TSM do one better? Give Toronto their first loss in FACEIT? Maybe they're a bit vulnerable after their Dallas experience. Maybe a good time to play them. Maybe a bad time to play them, depending on how Toronto reacts in that one. So I think that'll be one of the more high-profile games. Similarly, we're going to get M80 versus LG. This is maybe going to be most interesting just for who plays for M80. And also, similarly, for a while now in North America, we've talked about the top 2 in Toronto and M80. Maybe a lot of that really comes into question with M80's potential roster changes. But for LG, a good chance to show how close they are. Similarly, LG are also going to play NRG, which I think will be a very interesting game in that kind of battle. But I think the highest stakes, because a lot of those games we talked about are primarily just for seeding. All these teams will get to top 8, where the matches will count that little bit more. It's all about qualification. So it's important we look at the strength of schedule for all of these teams. So we can start with Shikigami, if I can find them. If I can use the power of eyesight to narrow down. Obviously, they've got a few less games than everybody else. Really testing my eyesight now. I might be legally blind. There we go. So they've got Luminosity, which is obviously a tough game for sure. They've already played their round 14 game. And where are they on this final one? Here they are, NRG as well. So a pretty tough run-in. So they might only be quite limited in terms of how many more wins they got, and maybe relying a little bit on have they done enough early on to secure that. And I think the answer is probably yes. They've had a very good run these last couple of weeks, and I think it might be enough, even if they can't cause an upset against Luminosity or NRG. So the teams really in contention are Pip, who are currently sitting in that 8th place spot. Pip actually have a tough running. So they're going to be playing NRG, which is not free. They're going to be playing M80, which, regardless of what roster you actually get there, won't be free. Once we get to the sort of final block of 3 games, where are they? They're going to be playing Gilberts Nightmare. This is the one. This is a must-win, right? This is a must-win. And they should win it. But we've seen Green Fortnite slip up against Gilberts Nightmare before, so hopefully Gilberts Nightmare aren't in some kind of giant killing form. Pip will be praying for that. They also have to play Citrus Nation, who are another one of these teams in contention. So that's an absolutely massive game between these 2 teams. And then they get to cap it off with a Toronto game. So it's not a great strength of schedule. Well, it's a great strength of schedule in terms of it's strong, but it's not a great run-in to have at the end of this tournament. Realistically, they're probably looking at 1 win. The Citrus Nation games may be in the balance, but like 1 to 2 wins out of this, which one puts their position in real jeopardy, but for a lot of the chasing teams, makes it really possible. If we look at Green Fortnite's situation comparatively, they play Luminosity, which, again, doesn't sit in the free category. Then they play NRG. Also, you know the prize in these games. They're not free at all. Them M80, And then, where are we for the final one? Citrus Nation on the final day. And did they play this one already, or am I just blind? Yeah, no, they played this one already. And that was the upset against Gilberts Nightmares. So, again, you look at these games and you go, they have to cause an upset to make something happen. The Citrus Nation game on the final one is massively in the balance, right? That's the big one. Citrus Nation, obviously, we'll talk about in a second, as they have a little bit of control in their own hands. You can see in these final 2 games against Pip and against Green Fortnite will actually be massive in determining who does get in that final top 8 spot. As far as the rest of Citrus Nation's running go, they have to play TSM, which will be a particularly hard one. And they have to play FMCL, which again sits in the hard category. But they do have this UNC Inc game, which I think that one should be the one where they seal that win, they get that one at least on the board, and then they have 2 swing games against Pip and Green Fortnite. That'll be absolute nail biters to make sure they can secure the wins there. Obviously, the big question for Citrus Nation, as we always say, is will the roster play? Will their starting lineup play? There's maybe a little bit of hope as well now with Mauga coming back into meta, and that maybe solves some of the problems Zeb was having hero pool-wise. I don't know how good his Mauga is, but in theory, it fits into the ground tank archetype, so hopefully helpful for him. Then a team who are a little bit behind the 8th place pack for a while are Fluffy Aimers, but Fluffy Aimers have Avidity, which should be a slam dunk. Then they have UNC Inc, which again, slam dunk. Then their last couple of games are tougher, FMCL and TSM, so they might struggle there, but that's at least 2 more wins on the board. And if we take a look back at the standings, and we look at the strength of schedule for a lot of these teams, if Fluffy Aimers can put themselves on 7, suddenly it gets a little bit tight for some of these teams, you know? Yeah, how many wins can Pip put on the board? Obviously, if you're a team like Fluffy Aimers, what you actually want is maybe Citrus Nation and Green Fortnite and Pip to all sort of trade their matches, you know, so they maybe only get 1 more win each and you get 7. It might well come down to difference and some tiebreakers as well. So really a lot to play for as we head into this final week of North America. And compared to EMEA, when there's actually quite a few spots still up for grabs, it really feels like it's just in this 8th place spot. Just in this spot that Pip currently occupying, are desperate to hang on to, that is really in contention. You have to feel that FMCL and Luminosity will get enough wins to probably actually overtake Shikigami as well, if we're being honest, and put themselves in that sort of top 6. But this battle for 8th is going to go all the way. So hopefully that brings you up to speed with a little bit of the stakes and where the teams are as we go into this final week. Obviously, if you want to watch a lot of the games live, I will be streaming as many of them I can on Twitch. Even some more of the North American games this week, given the stakes. We'll catch up on any replays we miss. Likewise, if you don't catch any of that live, all the VODs will be on this channel. You can go back and watch the full matches, watch the full cast of them, and see the drama unfold for yourselves. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Like and subscribe if you don't already, and I'll see you in the next one.